Hey y'all, welcome back to the Impact Defense Podcast, Season 2, Episode 7.
All right, guys, in this episode, we're going to talk about common mistakes in self-defense training. When you're learning self-defense, you need to have a very good, well-rounded look and approach at self-defense. You can't just look at it like it's a fight. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about today.
All right, but don't forget about our sponsor in this episode of the podcast, which is Hold Fast by Caruso.
It was a very professional voice there, Kylie.
Why, thank you. I honestly try.
Yeah, Hold Fast has a lot of very neat, good products. Kylie's got the In God We Trust shirt on with the shield. I really like that one. I'm wearing the Iron Sharpens Iron Hold Fast shirt. Really good. Check them out in the link in the description.
All right, common mistake number 1. It's an overemphasis on fancy techniques.
Yeah, so a lot of people, when they do a self-defense seminar or start teaching self-defense, they're doing stuff that is entirely too difficult to learn, especially if it's a seminar.
And like too many steps,
Yeah,
too.
entirely too many steps. If you have a lot of steps, then you're going to have a hard time actually being able to really, really make that work. When your body produces adrenaline, it's a great and awesome, wonderful thing. You don't feel everything.
Right.
One of the biggest thing that I bring up in that respect is one of my MMA fights. I fought this guy. We went 3 rounds. At the end of the fight, I didn't even realize I had gotten hit at all. And the next morning, and I said something to my brother about it, and he was like, yeah. The next morning I get up, and my sides are completely and totally bruised because after he had me on the ground, he hit me in the ribs a lot. I didn't even realize it because of that adrenaline. Adrenaline makes you not feel some things. If you are not super highly sensitive to pressure points, you will not feel them at all when adrenaline hits. So that is really good. But what adrenaline also does is it kills your fine motor skills. And if you're training to do these super complicated, crazy things, you are not actually going to be able to pull that off against an attacker who, number 1, is really seriously, aggressively trying to hurt you. And number 2, you have that adrenaline flowing through your veins.
And you also have to think about the person that's never done like any martial arts before and never done like any type of steps.
Yeah, especially like in a self-defense seminar kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean,
so if we're looking outside of just classes, regular classes.
Regular people that are just wanting to know about self-defense and the basic idea, not just like a whole overarching, all right, this is how you do this, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 10.
Yeah.
All the way through there, and they're just like, huh?
Yeah. All right, common mistake in self-defense training number 2 would be neglecting that mental preparedness. I see this constantly, and it drives me absolutely crazy because everybody just looks at a self-defense situation like it's a fight. They don't talk about like awareness. They don't talk about
the things to prevent the fight in the first place.
Yeah, they never talk about that kind of stuff. It's like, hey, if I'm walking through and some dude jumps out of the bushes and grabs me, or jumps out from around the corner, and grabs me or something, then this is the technique that I'm going to do. If we are, mentally and situationally aware of the things that are going on around us, you're a whole lot less likely to be picked as a victim to begin with.
Yes.
Or picked as a target to begin with. You love that word.
I love it so much. But statistics show that you are most likely going to be a victim if you're the person that's like on your phone with 2 earbuds in and just not carrying yourself in a way that makes you seem confident.
Well, let's say picked as a target instead of just victim, because you're not necessarily, even if you're picked as a target, you're not necessarily going to be a victim because you might be the victor in that situation. The big thing is there that we're making sure that we're paying attention to the things that are going on around us and everything else. And the other things, and we talked about this when we had Dr. Sharice Johnson on here. If you actually defend yourself, then you may have like a little bit of regret for what you may have done to someone. It's very possible. You also, if you fail to do so, you may have regret. We also need to talk about that flight, fight, freeze, or fawn. We have those 4 things that can happen, which that really needs to be a podcast all to itself. We could do an episode on that at some point in time as well.
Common mistake number 3. Failure to actually practice realistic scenarios.
Yeah, we go back to that whole idea of just somebody jumping out from the bushes or something. And ambush attacks do happen, but it's not like that's every single attack. A lot of times it's a coercion. Sometimes it is, and especially statistically speaking, in the case of females, it is almost always somebody that they know.
Yeah.
They have been groomed in some form or fashion.
Yeah.
So,
which people, I think, like, neglect to say that.
yeah, especially in training. People don't look at it like that, and they don't think about that, and they don't address that. Grooming is a huge thing, and it doesn't matter. We've talked about grooming in the aspect of like human trafficking, but grooming can be in the aspect of so many other crimes. You know, you could be groomed out of your money. You could be groomed, and then raped. You could be groomed and just all kinds of things. They can use grooming for all kinds of things, not just human trafficking and take you away. There's all kinds of different crimes that can be committed purely by grooming you first.
Right.
But when we are looking at ambush attacks, so many people don't take into effect, well, let's say, like looking back at the one previously and saying like, adrenaline and anything that goes on mentally, as well, mentally and emotionally, and all these things, they're going to affect how you're going to feel in that situation. And yeah, you need to understand like how to do this, but then not ever putting someone in a high stress kind of scenario in the training. That's detrimental to their ability to actually protect themselves, because you've got to get it to a point where you can actually do the technique first. And we go back to our first thing, keeping things simple. Even then, if someone's rather untrained or whatever, we want to be able to do it well first, and then we need to actually do it in a realistic way to where you get some realistic feedback. We talk about often in our classes that if you grab somebody and you don't grab them hard, you kind of grab them easy because you're being nice, then what you're doing is you're setting them up for failure if it actually ever happens in a real life situation, because somebody's going to think either, number one, that it's easy to get out of, or number two, that they are Superman or Superwoman, and they cannot be held in this position. And the truth is, it doesn't matter. You can be held in that position, and you need to learn how to work through it and work on it. So we have to constantly increase the level of pressure that we are working on in order to make it realistic.
And also, one thing that I think they also neglect is your attacker may be a man, but it also may be a woman.
It's possible, yeah. All right, common mistake in self-defense training number 4. We go back to, I think this was the second episode of our season.
Either third.
Second or third episode of the season, where we're talking about the importance of physical fitness and self-defense, and my biggest failure. But again, that is something that we have been working on tremendously. We just got done with another very big workout right before the podcast. A lot of these episodes are being recorded. We kind of scheduled this, like we get together, we do a workout, we work out really hard, and then it's workout.
And then after we're wiped out, we do a podcast, because that makes sense.
Yeah, it's great. Wakes the brain up. I think it's really good. Wakes the brain up.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned running away. That's a big thing. If you can run away, if you can't run more than 50 feet without being winded, then that is a bad thing. Okay. Also, if you can't fight for a couple minutes, that's also a bad thing. Right. Self-defense situations, you might need to run. You might need to fight for longer than, 2 seconds.
Right.
I get really aggravated with people that are like, don't worry, if I hit them, all I do is hit them one time. And I'm like, okay, some people can take a shot, So I fought for a while. I know some people can really take a shot, and I'm really shocked at how hard you can hit somebody and they can stare back at you, and then you hit other people and they're done, with that one shot. So you can't just count on being able to hit somebody one time and ending the thing. This whole end a fight in 3 seconds kind of bullcrap does not really work in the vast majority of cases. Sorry, but it's the truth. You need to have a good foundation in physical fitness in order to realistically defend yourself.
Yep. Common mistake number 5.
I was doing this like it's a countdown or something.
Relying solely on techniques and not on strategy.
Oh man, we've talked about this a lot too. So if you go somewhere and you say, okay, I'm going to learn self-defense, and it's all technique based, and it's not all about awareness, avoidance, and all of these things first before it ever comes up to, and it's more than just a mention, it's like, oh, be aware of your surroundings, avoid anything that's possible, run if you can. And that'd be the end of the talk. I think entirely too many times working with some people, that's been the kind of thing. It's like, oh, boom, 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 here are these 3 things. And you're good if they actually mention those 3 things at all. Most of the time it's, all right, this attacker comes up, grabs your wrist. So we want to have really good strategies behind doing certain things, making sure that we are paying attention to things that are going around us, know our exits if you're in a building, all of these things where it's just this kind of...
Make a game plan if you feel unsafe.
Yeah. I mean, there's strategies for everything. I took a bodyguard course, third-party protector course, whatever you want to call it. I took one of those, and it was really interesting because, my gosh, at the level of what they look at in these situations is really, really interesting. I mean, when you're talking about driving, you're talking about the types of rooms that you would pick. If you're going to be staying somewhere, is very in-depth, very strategic in everything that they're doing to keep people safe. And when you're trying to keep yourself safe as well, you need to make sure that you are kind of having a strategy to what you're doing and not just looking at techniques. Common mistake number 6 in self-defense training would be not considering any legal ramifications. This is another big thing. We teach concealed carry at Impact Defense. So this is a big thing that we talk about, every time I'm teaching that class. I'm constantly talking about legal implications.
Where you can go overboard.
Yeah. So there is a whole, and this is probably a decent idea. I think we've touched on it before in a podcast, but that whole ladder of aggression thing, and kind of making sure that you don't go so far over. If like in your case, if somebody comes up and steals your purse and you grab them and you beat the ever living crap out of them, then you've probably gone too far.
Yeah.
So understanding that you can only go so far depending on what they do to you. If it is a lethal, threat, then you can respond with lethal force.
Right.
But if they take your purse, you can't stab them.
That's not worth like beating the ever living crap out of them.
Well, I mean, I was going all the way to lethal force. You can't use a lethal response to a non-lethal threat.
Right.
So remember these types of things. You can be prosecuted, and honestly, even in a scenario where somebody comes up and attacks you and you defend yourself, even if you don't go beyond those lines, you still could possibly be sued or charged and then have to fight that case legally in defending yourself. And that's why there are legal insurances out there. I mean, there are self-defense insurances out there and things that will help you in those situations.
Shout out to US LawShield.
Yeah, US LawShield's awesome. Actually, if you look in the link in the description, we will try to make sure we have a link to a US LawShield. I think it's one of the most affordable and important plans, to have something along those lines.
So just as a summary or recap, whatever word you prefer, don't do fancy techniques. Don't neglect the mental preparedness. Don't forget about practicing realistic scenarios. Don't overlook physical fitness. Don't forget about the strategy. And finally, don't forget about the legalness.
The legalness?
The legalness.
How about the legal implications or ramifications or something like that?
Yeah, all those big words.
Okay. All right. So anyway, guys, thank you very much for listening to the podcast. We talked a while back, really when we started to get this kind of set up with the microphones and everything and sounding a lot better. We had several people comment saying, hey, you guys are sounding a whole lot better with all of this stuff. We are still in that same thing. And we've had podcasts about it with talking about constant and never-ending improvement. Last podcast and now starting with this podcast, we actually have someone else who is now training as a producer. I'm not trying to produce and do everything on the fly all of a sudden.
Yep.
So this is making my life a whole lot easier and making it easier to think about what I am trying to say while we're doing this. So
instead of, I got to press this button and then this button and then make sure that volume is correct.
Yes, exactly. So shout out to our new producer, Luke.
Thank you for listening to the podcast. Stay safe, stay alert, and we'll see you in the next one.
See you guys.